Hello class, I'm just decided I would do a little extra recording today. I was starting to work on my own creature and trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do, and thought that if I recorded a little demo on how I'm starting, just to play with some concepts, it might help you guys to see that in action. I'm going to be using a lot of the techniques I already showed you. You don't have to use these exact techniques, but I just thought it would help for a workflow sense. So I've already done quite a bit of searching. I showed you guys a lot of the images that I had downloaded. So I'm just quickly going to pop into that file that I had. And I had this reference, bunch of JPEG and PNG references that I downloaded, different creatures, different ideas, and I'm just going to work with this particular one right now, this angler fish, I think it's called, or something like that, deep sea fish, kind of scary looking. Now when I showed you guys the reference stuff yesterday, we were working with very specific reference that had sort of a perfect front view and a perfect side view. You could always go into Photoshop and create your own, do your own sketches that sort of give you a guide for side view and a front view, and bring those in and use them that way. For this particular case, I just want to do a rough concept, just to get something started, just to see the shape, to see if it's what I want to work with. So I'm going to run through this in a very sort of quick manner. What I'm going to do in this case, here we go. I'm going to use this PureRef program that I told you guys about, that I find really convenient for a lot of things. And so I just fired up PureRef. It brings in this screen for me. Now I can just grab this and just drag and drop it right on there. And we're just going to close out that file folder. PureRef, you can go through all its steps on how to use it. If you right click over the window and just sort of hover over, you can drag that window into different positions on your screen over top of your existing application. You can grab the corner, scale that window around. If you hold Z and actually click down on your monitor in here, you can scale. This is very similar to Photoshop. And if you middle click in that area, you can drag that image around and get it sort of centered in on the area that you want. I'm going to need to open up this dock for some of the stuff that I'm doing, so I'm going to do that right now, because you can see it changes the space I have to work in. Then I'm going to put my angler fish something close to the middle of my canvas, and I'm going to, oops, let me move that back there, and I'm going to go under my PureRef menu. Now, by default, it is set to always on top, which means it's always going to try and stay on top of any other application that is open. And for this particular case, I'm going to be using the transparent, or the see-through function of ZBrush that I showed you guys yesterday, just quickly. So I'm going to just change this over to always on bottom. So now it has basically sent that window in behind my ZBrush application, and I can work on top and get my basic shape sorted out. Okay, next step from there, what I'm going to do is, in my Lightbox, I'm going to go over to Tool here, and I'm going to start my project with this polysphere right here. And I'm going to double click on it once. It is going to open a tool here for me. I know I'm going to need another one of these to bring in for some eyeballs or eyeball placeholders. So I'm just going to double click on it twice. So now I have two sets over here already. I won't have to come back in later. Then I'm going to hit the comma key and go out of the Lightbox area. Then going to drag, oops, you can see what I did there. I accidentally dragged twice, so I need to fix that, because if I go into edit mode now, I will only have one of them, but I could Control N, and then that will clear out any ones that are not editable. Here we go. So if you started this way, your ball would already have subdivisions on it. Mine does not, so I'm going to hit Control D twice to bring my subdivisions up and have 24,000 points. That just gets it a little smoother in its shape. And then I'm going to turn it into a Dynamesh to start working right away. So I'm going to come over under my geometry, down to my Dynamesh. I'm going to start with a 64 on my Dynamesh. I want to start very low. I want to really easily be able to manipulate this mesh into its shape, and I'm going to turn on Dynamesh, and it asks me if I want it to revert back. No, I don't, and there we go. You can see it is a Dynamesh ready to go. Now, one of the features I showed you guys yesterday, I'm just going to close out that brush thing there, was the image plane reference. Well, we can use part of that functionality, not all of it, to do some of the stuff that I want to do here. And I'm going to open up that image plane area, which is at the bottom of our texture menu, which I brought over. I'm not actually going to load in an image plane with that anglerfish on it, because I've already placed it underneath my ZBrush application, and if I grab onto this see-through, you can see there it is right there underneath. So I'll just drag this see-through over a little bit, and so we can sort of see through. But I'm going to open up these reference views, and if you remember, if you click on these, and if I were to turn on my floor, it might be more obvious, and well, it's kind of hard to see because it's a sphere, but if you click on these, it is jumping and it is changing the angle that we are looking at this sphere. One of those options is a custom view, and so if we start rotating around, I'm just going to get a little bit more. So I'm just going to start rotating around and figure out, okay, this is the front of my sphere. This anglerfish is looking off on an angle slightly towards me, but down towards the left. So I'm just going to rotate this down a little, and then I'm going to rotate it out that way. And you can see, I can almost see with the floor, if I have it something close to me looking at this sphere in a similar angle to what the photograph of this anglerfish was. And I'm just going to sort of place it over his face right here. And once I have that set, I'm going to have this custom one view selected, and I'm just going to say store view. And now if I were ever to come in here and accidentally move this off of where I'm trying to use my reference, I can just come back in here, click on the custom view, and you can see it just jumps right back. So I'm using that functionality but without the image plane in the background, because I'm using the see-through method, because I don't really care to have this fish in there for very long. At this point, I'm just going to start doing some very quick sculpting, and because I'm looking at this sphere in a similar angle to what the fish is, I don't necessarily need a straight-on view to get something going with this. So what I'm going to do is grab my I'm going to grab my clay buildup brush. So I'm going to hit B and C and B for clay buildup. I believe my wife may have just sent me a text message, so ignore that if it's popping up on the screen. Hopefully it was nothing inappropriate. So I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger, and I'm going to just take a look at this mouth. So we know that this mouth goes in. Oh, also I'm going to turn on symmetry so that I know that I'm working on both sides of the mesh at the same time. And now I can just hold down my Alt key, and I can just very quickly come in here and start to just very quickly, and you can see how quickly the mesh moves because it's very low resolution. And then Control drag to re-Dynamesh it, and just keep carving in. And already, just like that, I have established the beginnings of a mouth, as you can see right there. So now I've moved it off. I need it back. I just click on that custom view, and it's right back in the proper place. Next thing I'm going to look at here is the shape around this eye. We know that this eye should be inset in behind this lip a little bit, just by what we know that this would sort of look like. So again, I can hold down the Alt key, and I'm just going to push a little bit of the mesh back in that way. And then this area above the eye is almost like a big brow line on this fish. So I'm just going to, without the Alt key down, draw a line that sort of follows that. And you can see what I've created very, very quickly. Just created sort of these basic shapes. I'm just trying to get myself started here. I'm not trying to do a precision job. Now I'm going to go to my move brush because I just want to move some pieces of mesh around here a little bit. And I'm also going to adjust how much I can see that fish. I need to see a little more of it for what I'm about to do. So I'll go B, M, sorry, is this not working? Here, B, brush, where's my brush? For some reason my brush is not coming up. I apologize. So we'll just do it this way. B, M, and then we'll go over to the move brush here. And so now, now my see-through is turned off. As you can see, ZBrush does a lot of weird things. So I'm just going to crank that see-through up a little bit again. I'm going to come over here with my move brush and a fair size on it, and I'm just going to start dragging the edge of this in and trying to match somewhat of the silhouette of this fish from this angle. It doesn't mean it's right, it doesn't mean it's wrong, but I can start to get a basic mesh for myself. Also, we know, I mean, fish don't really have chins, so this area down here would be quite flat. So again, with just a big move brush, I'm just going to start to drag the edge of that up. And like I said, I'm not really after super accuracy or anything like that. I'm just trying to grab a quick shape. Next, I'm going to go back to my clay buildup, BCB. And I'm going to just size that up a little bit. We also know that this fish has this sort of big nodule thing on top of his head, and then there's a spike that comes off it that lures other fish in. Oh, we have a message coming up on my PureRef asking me if I want to save this. And I don't care. I don't want to save it. It is still there. It's just asking if you want to save the file. It's an auto-save feature. So I'm going to take my clay buildup, and I'm just going to build up a little bit of clay on the top and the middle of the head there. And then if I turn my see-through off, you can see in like no time I have a very quick but relatively good reference or starting of a mesh that I can use to start creating this fish. And at this point, I think I can just sort of start making stuff up on my own, but I still want my reference image. So I'm going to jump over to my PureRef. So the menu comes up here. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say mode. I'm going to say on top. And once I do that, I can resize this window down, double click in there. I believe resizes the image that you're double clicking on. Right click and drag this over here. And now I can go back over to my ZBrush. I can continue working, and I have my reference image over here, something to look at to give me some guidance. I'm just going to control drag to redynamish that quickly. And now with my clay buildup, make sure that that's the brush I have, I'm just going to start punching in some of the shapes that I see in my reference image. So this reference image, this bottom lip looks like it's quite rounded, and then this top lip also looks quite rounded, and then it sort of overlaps this bottom lip. I don't have that going on in my sculpt yet, so I'm just going to throw that in quickly right here with my clay buildup. I'm just going to quickly come across here and just lightly brush across, getting a little bit of that shape in. I'm not after super accurate detail yet. I'm just trying to get something started to see if this is a direction that I want to go with. You can see I'm crunching in my mesh right there. I'm going to undo. This is that super thin mesh that I've talked about before. What would really help me here would be to have access to that back face masking, which is under the brush menu, which is one way I could resolve this. So it would be under the brush menu, under auto masking, and then back face masking. Now when I brush in this area, it won't collapse on itself like that. But remember that setting can also affect how well your move brush works. So if you're going to use your move brush, you may need to turn that off. But I'm just going to, you can see, just quickly punch in some lips there, control drag to redynamish. Now I'm finding that he's looking sort of up in the air. It's not an angle that's optimal for me see what's going on. So I'm just going to snap to my side view, grab my 3D gizmo, and I'm just going to turn his head down a little. And there we go. I haven't moved it off the center line or anything. He also has these very big brow lines up here. So I'm just going to, again, clay buildup brush. I'm just going to punch in a little extra meat or flesh up here on top. And maybe a little stripe through the bottom. Control drag. And there, I have a very good starting for just a basic mesh to see if this is something I want to do. Now to go from here, I'm going to add some eyes, some eyelids, and do a little bit more detailing, maybe pull out a neck and some shoulders before I stop this little demo. And hopefully this doesn't end up being too long of a video. Okay, so in order to bring in some eyes quickly for myself, go over here to Subtool. I'm going to go to Insert. As I said, I already brought in that second sphere, which should show up right here, so I can just pop that in quickly. I can hit Control D on that a couple times to smooth it out. I am going to turn this into a Dynamesh just so I don't have to worry about it later. I'm going to keep this one at a 128 because I'm probably going to convert the head over to 128 before I merge them together. So I'll just say Dynamesh on that. No, I don't want to return it. And now I can just scale that down, bring it over here, pop it up here, and start to try and position that somewhere in the area where the eyelid might be, or the eye or the eyelid might be, right there. We'll say that that's good enough for right now. Actually, I'm just going to pull that into the head just a little bit more. There we go. Now, I also would always want the other side. Notice I did this on the left side of my model. I've just gotten very used to knowing that I need to work on that side so that I can come back in here under Geometry, Modify Topology, and do a mirror weld and get a second eyeball or whatever it is I'm trying to mirror over very quickly and easily. Now, I'm going to hold down Alt, click on the head again, because now this is the area that I want to be sculpting on. I'm not worrying about the eyes, those are placeholders for the moment. I'm just going to pull some of this out a little around that eye, and then I actually think I might want to set that back. So with a move brush, BMV, again, as I just said, I think that stuff under the brush menu, the auto masking, oh, backface masking has turned itself off again, so we're going to be okay. But that can sometimes affect how well this move brush can do its job, so just wanted to double check that. So I'm just going to pull that in like that. Also, he's a fish. The eyes are going to be more set to the side of the head on this angle than to the front of the head like a human. But I want to sort of average in between a little bit because this is supposed to be a sort of mammalian creature. So I'm sort of trying to meld a marriage between sort of human forms and this fish forms. So that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that for right now. Now I'm looking at these eyes that I brought in. I want to merge them in and use them as eyelids, I think, for this guy. Or I might use these as eyes and then create other eyelids on top. Let's do that. So I'm just going to Alt-click. Oops, come on. Alt-click. It doesn't seem to want to go for me. ZBrush. So I'm just going to come over here and select those eyes. I am going to duplicate a set of those eyes. The top set, I'm going to select them, say rename, and just so I don't get confused, I'm going to call those lid. Now I need to make those a little bit bigger than the actual eyes. This comes into knowing whether you're in symmetry and the whole local symmetry thing I taught. So I'm going to go over to my 3D gizmo. I do not have symmetry on, so I'm going to turn symmetry on. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click on this little Google icon, which will make it jump to the center of one of the two eyes. Just depends on which one you hover over. Doesn't really matter. At this point, I want to scale this up slightly so it's a little bit bigger than the eyeballs to create the eyelid with it. If I grab this center one, it will scale them uniformly, but it will, oh, interesting. It's not quite doing what we expect it to do. If you can see, it's pushing away from the center of the world, just based on having the symmetry on. So we need to turn on this local symmetry in order to make sure the eyeballs are scaling from the center of themselves and actually growing around the eyeball that's underneath. If you don't understand this, we'll have to talk about this again next week, but sometimes you need that when you're working with symmetry and trying to scale an object that's only on one side. So there we go. We have the lid scaled up. And now I'm going to go back onto my draw mode. And I'm going to start to shape this eyelid just before I merge it into the head. This is not the only technique for doing this, but it's something that I've done a couple times. It works pretty nice for quick shapes. I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm just going to draw a mask right through the middle of that eye, almost where I'd want to split that eye open. I'm going to Control click on it a couple times to blur it. Then I'm going, oops. Then I want to click to Control click outside to invert it. And if maybe you can see what I'm about to do. So now I'm going to activate my 3D gizmo again, and I'm going to look around. What I want to do is grab this blue arrow and just drag it straight backwards. And you will see what very quickly happens is we end up with a gap that then reveals the actual piece that I want to use as an eyeball underneath. Go back to draw mode, clear my mask. I can re-Dynamesh. Now I want to merge these into my head, and I can continue on. No, I don't want to save that. And I can continue on doing my sculpting and whatever I want to do. So I'm going to come up to the head, and if you remember, I did the eyelids at 128. I did this one at 64 to get this rough shape in, but now I can move it up to 128, and it wouldn't be too much resolution for me to deal with. So I'm going to do that just before I merge them together. If I didn't do this, when I merge this down into the eyelids would become a lower resolution and might not hang on to quite as much of the creasing around them as I want. So I'm just going to come in here under Geometry, under Dynamesh. I'm going to change this to 128 and hit Return, and then just go over here and Control drag, and you'll see that Dynamesh has obviously worked and gotten higher. And now I can come under my subtool palette and say merge down, okay. Control drag. Now those eyelids are part of this head, and I can continue on with my sculpting and my concepting. So that'd be B clay buildup. It's just one of my favorite brushes for this type of stuff, and I can start to try and make some other decisions about what I want to do here, and also just to get a good view of, or a good concept of, is this going to work for me, for my creature? Is this something I want to continue working on, or is this just a bad idea? I still haven't assessed that myself, so I'm just going to hold down Alt and carve that area in a little bit. You can see on my image over here, he has some sort of quite big lumpy changes, and then he's got this bone here which almost looks like a cheekbone coming along there. So I'm actually going to use that. So I'm going to just quickly come in here and put sort of that first. So I'm going to try and duplicate those forms a little. Have that one coming in there, and then I'm going to have another, that lump that he's got sort of coming off over here. Again, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just trying to throw some forms in here. Then I could say that maybe this whole thing that I actually have coming out here is like the mandible or the jawbone. So I'm just going to smooth that down a little and sort of tuck the idea of a jawbone sort of coming under there. I bet you it actually is the jawbone in this fish. Now you can see I'm getting a little stretched out, because it's a very low resolution, so I'll just control drag to remesh that a little. And now you can see I've sort of got the starting of this nice fish. I did have one idea when I started working on this project, that I wanted to combine a couple of some other stuff from some other creature images that I found. One of them in particular was sort of a lip area that came in here and then sort of spiked up this way instead of it just sort of being this big gaping open mouth. And then when I closed the mouth, this spike would sort of come up in front of the face right here. So I'm just going to quickly do a little test on that and throw that spike in there sort of like that. I think you can see sort of what I'm after. Then I'm going to snap to my side view. I'm going to hold my control key down and go over to mask lasso. And if I just take this around and mask out sort of that lower jaw area, still holding control, blur it a couple times over here, control click off to invert it. If I'm snapped to my side view, this will work. I can go into my 3D gizmo while holding the Alt key, recenter it, and get it to face straight up and down. So I know from my side view this is perfectly straight now. Still holding my Alt key, so with the gizmo unlocked from the mesh, I can now move it to the approximate pivot location of this jaw. And then if I rotate it, you can see I can almost give myself an idea. Is that spike going to go in the right area? Is that going to look nice when I do this? And I think it looks pretty cool. I mean, his head would need to be tilted forward this way to look really, really cool, but I like it. I think it's going to look pretty neat. So I'm actually just going to pull that forward just ever so slightly, and then I'm going to open it up again because I do not want to accidentally dynamesh it closed. If I had unmasked this and redynameshed, all that mesh would have fused itself together. So I'm just going to open this mouth back up for myself here. Now, when I'm on a side view like this, remember I'm rotating the red circle in order to do this, not the white one. And then I'll clear that mask. There we go. So that is a neat little concept I thought was kind of fun. So I'm going to run with that. Last part that I want to show you, and you can see how rough this is, but it's shaping up. It's starting to be a decent concept. The last part I'm going to show you is, just let me turn off the floor, it's sort of in my way now, is just popping out a quick neck and shoulder area to start sculpting on from this. So I'm going to hold down control, I'm going to grab my mask pen, and I'm just going to draw a quick sort of mask on the bottom of his head right here. Something approximately the size of the area of the neck and where I think the neck would sort of be coming out of. I'm then going to just maybe blur it once and then, oops, and then, come on. So I just tried to invert the mask and it didn't, so I just hit Control Z to bring that mask back for myself. And now again, for this particular thing, I'm working in the center and I don't want symmetry to accidentally get in my way and be off. So I'm actually going to turn symmetry off right now and then go to my gizmo, hold down the Alt key and click on this little Google icon, and now you can see it is centered right in the world and right in the middle of my selection. At this point, if I hold down the Alt key, unlocking it, I can even turn it so it matches the angle that I feel I want to pull that neck out on. You don't have to do that, but I just find it really helps me get an idea of my orientation of what I'm doing. So now you can see, boom, I haven't unselected it yet, but I've started to pull out a very quick mesh that I could use for a neck. Now, most necks have a nice curve. It sort of goes like this in the back of them. Just as a technique thing, before you unmask this or move anything, if you were to just start rotating this, look what that does. Not only does it give you a nice curve in the back of the neck, it actually gives you quite a nice curve in the front of the neck. And you can just sort of play with the blue and green arrows to sort of tweak that into something that might be sort of a nice starting point for creating that. At this point, I'm going to say that looks nice to me, and I'm going to unselect and just clear those masks, and I think we're looking pretty nice. I would like to rotate this whole head forward just a hair. I find he's almost looking up in the air, which is a little, I don't know, just doesn't feel right to me. And for sculpting, you kind of want things to feel right. So in order to do that, I'm going to go back to my 3D Gizmo. I'm going to hold Alt. I'm going to center that back in the mesh and center it in its orientation to the world. You can see the reason it went right to the middle is because I don't have symmetry on. Now snapped to my side view. I also need to make sure I take the eyeballs. Watch what happens if I don't. If I start rotating without the eyeballs are not going to go with it. So I'm just going to hit Control Z to put it back. I need to turn on this thing so that those eyeballs travel with it as I rotate it slightly forward. That feels better to me, just as an angle for me in my own mind to be working on. So I'll just turn that off now, go back into my draw mode, and we can continue on. So let's get some quick shoulders in there, sculpt a little bit of some anatomy into the shoulders quickly, and then I'm going to end this little tutorial on some technique stuff. All right, so I'm going to hold down the Control key. I'm going to grab my mask lasso brush, and I'm just going to quickly mask around the bottom of his shoulders here. Holding Control, I click on it a couple of times to blur it. Then I'm going to click off with the control down to invert the mask. Back to my gizmo. Again, I do not have symmetry on. That is why the gizmo keeps going to the middle of everything. I'm going to hold the Alt key and click on the Google thing, which will send it back to the middle of my masked area. And now, using my scale effectors on my gizmo, I can just sort of quickly start to scale out a mesh that could be used for a shoulder, and then I could drag it down. I could scale it on its Z-axis and drag it forward a little, and look what we have. A great starting mesh for to start building some muscles off of for shoulder region. All right, no, I don't want to save that. It keeps asking me. So I'm just going to go back to my draw mode now. I'm going to clear my mask, and now I can continue on doing a little bit more sculpting. So brush clay buildup is the one I'm after. I really like the clay buildup. For just to get myself going here, I'm going to put in this little notch that everybody sort of has at the base of their neck, and I'm going to Control drag to redynamesh, and then I'm just quickly going to say now I want to turn on symmetry actually. So let me undo back to that. Turn on symmetry. Do this. Put in what? Oh, come on, symmetry. Now symmetry's on, and this would be sort of the tip of your clavicle, and then it goes down into your sternum right here. And the clavicle is almost a little sort of S shape. It comes across here and then curves up and then goes out towards where the shoulder is. So I'm just putting that in as sort of a little landmark for myself. Helps me get some basic anatomy in here that just makes things look a little better. So there's the clavicle. Then there's those two muscles. They're very prominent and really help to make a neck look nice. Is the sternocleidomastoid, I always say it wrong, I know, but they basically start right about here at the back of the skull, and they go across the neck towards the front, and they basically attach the clavicle and the top of the sternum to the back of the skull and allow you, well, one, they keep your head on, or they're one of the things that help keep your head on, but they also help you rotate your head side to side. And so we'll just throw those, a rough bit of mesh in for those, like that. And then if I just hit that with a bit of a smooth brush, you can see how quickly hit this whole area with a bit of a smooth brush. You see how quickly and how easily I have sort of a nice basic mesh of that in there. And the other major muscle of your neck and shoulders is the trapezius muscles. They attach all over across the back of the skull here, and they come down in a diamond. It comes down in a diamond shape over your shoulders, attaches to the part of the clavicle here, and your the shoulder blade. I can't think of the technical name off the top of my head while I'm talking right now, but they basically connect across a ridge on the shoulder blade right here and then go down the back here. I don't have the back in, but that is the basic shape of them, and they sort of splay out like this. So there's, I mean, very rough, certainly not perfect, but I have the idea of that sort of muscle group in the neck there, controlled drag, and I think you can see already, there you go. That is a beautiful starting place for me to see, is this a concept that I want to go with? Is this something that I think is going to work out? Is it going to be kind of a creature that I'm going to be excited to work on or not? You know, obviously I'd be adding teeth later and all this type of stuff, but at this point I can make that sort of judgment call and continue on using all the tools that I've sort of shown you. But that, I would hope, really helps you see how you can very quickly just sort of hammer out a quick idea off of an image and see if it's something that you want to work on. All right, and with that, I'm going to call it a day and post this up, and have a great weekend. We'll see you on Tuesday. Take care.